Hello, hello. So today we're going to talk about parasites and vampires. That's exciting. And not literal parasites and literal vampires, but these people, sometimes situation, events that are actually draining your energy, draining your life force. So first question, who are your parasites and what can you do about it? And you know what? It might seem weird that we're talking about parasites today because I've been talking a lot lately about other type of topics that I'm super interested in as well. You know, the economy, the organizations, what they can do to be more resilient in this time of, tariff and stuff like that. And you can, listen, watch to all these videos. They're on my channel. But you know what? Despite my huge interest about all things, business, finance, government affairs, and so on, I'm still a human dealing with real people. And when you live in the real world, these interactions can be quite frustrating, infuriating, maybe. And I look at them as well as a great opportunity to look at where I stand in my life. And I would invite you to do the same, actually. And it's really this idea of what do I attract? And I'm not talking about, law of attraction, but rather what are the behaviors that people seem to be comfortable displaying around me? And what do I repel? Why do I repel in terms of behaviors I would like to see more of? So it's super important for you to understand that a very good reason is that, these people that I call, parasites, vampires, or interactions, events, situations, all of that, it drains your energy. Or if you're lucky, if you're interacting with great people, it boosts your energy. But that's not the topic of today's conversation. So when you interact with a vampire or a parasite, every time you're leaving a bit of your life force. And, if you're not mindful, very soon you will be depleted, but with nothing to show for because all this energy, all these, resources, time, energy, money that you are allocated to, again, these parasites, these vampires, well, you're not allocating them to your projects. So people are complaining about burnout. And I mean, today burnout is really rampant. Um, but what is burnout if not low or no energy? So the first thing you want to do when you feel, low energy or borderline burnouted is plug the holes. And the first holes to plug, I would say, is these interactions that don't bring you any value. These people who are sucking your time, your energy, your resources, including your money, for no good reason. Like it's not as if they were contributing anything in your life. So I see that when I coach my clients, and they're mostly CEOs, founders, but what comes up the most is interpersonal relationship, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's just like in normal life, I would say. And when I work with my own coaches and practitioners, I also have, every time I work, every week, every 2 weeks, I always come with my list of, what triggered me since my last interaction. And every time there is a nugget, something that is not sitting right with me for a good reason. So the word trigger, being triggered, now as a political, generational connotations, but I mean, in reality, being triggered is a gift. It's like this red flag that is showing you that you should spend some time exploring what's going on here. Why are these particular people and situations frustrating you, or I would say enraging you? Like I'm more of an enraging type of person than a frustrating type of person, to be honest. But the same situation might not bother your neighbor, or maybe a situation that's pissing me off is not bothering you at all, and the other way around. I might not even notice, and you're infuriating. So the question is really, why is this happening to you? And I would say again, because it's highly likely that it's not the first thing, it is a repeat. So again, what does it mean for you? And again, unless you are the Dalai Lama or Eckhart Tolle, and I don't believe they are watching or listening to my podcast, which is their total loss, you are feeling triggered, and you replace the word triggered by you feeling angry, you're feeling frustrated, resentful, jealous, powerless, you have murder like ideas, so on. You understand it's not a great feeling. So when you are triggered like that multiple times a day, this drains your energy. This is why, as well, it is so important to understand what's behind that. First, understanding the situation, but also healing what's underneath. Why are you so reactive to this situation? So, because now you can make the choice to look at these events, these triggering events, with curiosity, with compassion, with playfulness. If you're a very advanced player, I have to say, unfortunately, playfulness is not one of my super high quality. I need to make a lot of efforts to be playful, which means that by definition, I am not playful. But I mean, whether you want to continue to be unconscious and triggered, angry, exhausted, and think others are the problem, or you opt for door number one and you look at these events and you understand what's going on. And I'm not advocating to take the first choice or open the first door because I am a martyr. I'm absolutely not a martyr with a superior level of consciousness, but it is because I look at it that way. I was so tired of having my energy drained and being powerless in front of events I could not control that I decided, okay, let's understand what's going on. So, you know, no, my neighbor's kids will never say hello. Huh? But it is what it is. I can fume every time I see them and they don't answer to my hello, they pretend to ignore me. Oh, I can explore the reason why I am so angry about it. But I don't like the fact that kids don't say hi or answer to me. I think that's normal. But why is that enraging me? That should not be something I even notice by 30 seconds. That should already be forgotten, but it is not the case. So why? And, at some point you understand, well, guess what? For me as a kid, I was raised in an extremely authoritative way. So I feel great anger and I would say rage when I see anyone who's have the opportunity to act like a little brat because I had to be a sad, empty, smiling doll. So obviously these situations really trigger me. So, you know, I'm not saying that these situations should happen. Yes, people should be polite, respectful, da 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 da. Doesn't matter. But it should not enrage you. And I think for me, that's the type of thing that was very important is why am I overreacting so much and understanding why, working on it. And now it's just like, okay, that's all. I don't even, maybe I registered it a little bit, but barely. And that's what you want. And the situation I'm going to talk about, like a situation where I see very strong reactions for myself and others. As I said, a lot of that is things that are coming from my coaching clients, but they get out, like totally out of sorts when they face that type of situation. And I'm sure you will recognize yourself in some of them, maybe all of them. And I hope it will really lead you to question your reactions and also why some of the people that are acting that way are even in your life. Because I really want to be clear, these behaviors are not acceptable. Yes, we want to use them as a training ground to gain more peace and serenity by being less reactive to them, by healing yourself, by understanding why it is again a triggering event. And recurring offenders should be cut off. it is not mutually exclusive. And if you cannot cut them off, you can greywall them. And greywall means you limit the quality and the quantity of these interactions. So again, the goal here is not to learn how to smile when you're being disrespected. Absolutely not. The goal is not to learn of having your boundaries crossed. Absolutely not. But it is to learn why this is happening usually again and again, and how to minimize these instances. So in a nutshell, it's really spot them early, be ruthless, and also grow from there. So, and again, these situations, you might see them, and these people at work, in your home, at life, and I have no doubt that you will see your own variations. So, the first thing that I see triggering people a lot, and I've it's almost funny, but actually it's not because it's really frequent, is unrequested introductions. And again, that is something that used to trigger me a lot as well. And I really see some of my clients being triggered the fuck out of it. I'm not joking. And, set the stage, you're minding your own business. Suddenly, an email pop up. Usually it's a loose professional contact. And tack, he or she is introducing you to someone without having first asked you if you are okay with that. So you get frustrated, you get resentful, in a word, you get aggravated. And then you're getting in your mind, you're talking to yourself, you already don't have the time to see the people you want to see, you don't have the time to do the things you want to do, and now you have been contacted in order to speak with a rando you don't care about, just based on the fact that you both love chocolate or you're both women in business because it's so rare. So now you're really fuming, you're like working yourself up. What should you do? Should you ignore the email? But then what will be the consequences? People will think you are rude, or that you have a high opinion of yourself, or maybe that you are not on top of your game. Anyway, after spending a tremendous amount of mental energy, weighing the pros and the cons, ruminating, you usually end up sending a nice email saying, I will be delighted to have a discussion with whom, while at the same time you berate yourself. You berate the person who made the introduction, and you berate this new contact who, in some cases, has never asked for anything either. So, what went wrong in this scenario? Obviously, being introduced to someone without having given your permission first is a big no-no. And if you're watching or listening to me and you're doing that, you're actually sending unrequested introduction, stop it now. That's extremely rude. So when I wrote that piece, it actually happened to me that same morning. And I mean, between the back and forth emails and the time I will spend with that person, who might be lovely, nothing against that person, it will probably cost me between an hour and a half and 2 hours, plus the mental energy. Am I happy to allocate my resources there? I don't know. Maybe that person will be great, and yes, but you know what? It's rarely the case. Let's be honest. I had a lot of these unrequested introductions. When I entertain them, it's usually pretty underwhelming. But was I triggered when I received that email? Not at all. And so why? Because I used to be super triggered by these situations in the past. Like it was really, really annoying the fuck out of me, let's be honest. But I explored it to understand what was behind. And to be honest, I explored that with more rage than playfulness. Huh? And I realized that my anger was coming from different areas. The first, I felt that I had my boundaries crossed, which they were. It is impolite to put anyone in this situation. The second was I felt powerless. In my mind, I had to answer. I had to jump. There was no other choice. Someone is asking me for something. Who am I to say no? And again, and that's where, self-awareness is helpful. For me, it became quite obvious that, again, this extremely authoritative upbringing, which was combined with the expectations that I was there only to manage others people's needs, whether it's emotional needs, whatever. I was just there to serve others. So it had put me in a very challenging place because I could never say no even when a request was crossing my boundaries. And that was creating tremendous internal tension. And I see that over and over in people I coach or people I know. They get very worked up because at some point we are all in situations where our boundaries are trampled over and we're told to it doesn't matter and just grow up and deal with that, which if you have kids it's not the right way, FYI. So when I understood that process that I was reliving, the hundreds of times when I had to abandon myself to please others, like I saw the light because I also realized, well, guess what? I'm not that kid anymore. I don't have to stay still and jump only when I'm asked to do so, like I can choose. I had many options, like I had the options to contact the person who made the introduction and tell them, guess what? Don't send me unrequested introductions anymore. I could write back that I didn't have the time. I could just never answer. I could check the background of a person and decide if I wanted to meet them. Anyway, there were a lot of choices. So the powerlessness of the situation was a perception. It was not true. But I also realized, guess what? I am an adult now. I will deal with the consequences. If people think I'm rude, so be it. If I miss the intro of the century, so be it. So now when I receive this type of intro, I really don't care anymore because I can choose whatever I want to do with it depending on who's the person who's making the connection. Is it someone I respect, someone who, is always have my back? It's going to be very different. That is just like a freaking random who wants to look good in front of other people. Is the background of that person, relevant or not? So I just make my own decision and I still take a mental note on who that thoughtless introducer was and what was likely the intention behind. Because keep in mind, it can also be a good intention behind, not self-serving. So, you also want to understand what's that. So what can you do if that happens to you or if similar situations happen to you? So next time you are in this situation, first, don't berate yourself for feeling out of sorts. I always see that. Whether people bury their feelings, don't do that either. Whether they start insulting themselves for feeling out of sorts. Well, that doesn't help. So look at it as, again, an opportunity. Feel your feelings. I know we don't want to feel the feelings. It's shit. Da, da, da. We don't like it. We've buried our feeling for very long for a reason because we don't want to feel them. But it is a very short term and not helpful options because it's the same than putting a ball in water. Just gonna come up stronger at the most inopportune time. So don't do that. So take the time to fully feel, I don't know, the rage, the frustration, the powerlessness, whatever you're feeling. And I mean, you don't need to express it to others, just like ruminate. A good trick that works very well is take a few minutes, write down all your thoughts on a piece of paper related to that situation. Or that can be, trust me, I use a lot of um, fuck and over asshole type of words. And, don't feel that you have to be polite because no one will ever see that piece of paper. So write down all your thoughts related to that situation and then you shred it. I mean, if you are a very responsible adult, feel free to burn it. Personally, I love to shred it, less drama, and also it is very satisfying. And I can tell you, usually, just doing that calm me down. Of course, I spoke about tapping. If you're not aware about what tapping is, go into my previous video, go to YouTube. There are plenty of videos on tapping, but tapping is a very helpful tool to manage this surge of emotions and disconnect, from your brain and body, the flight or flight answer that's going to bring you in anger or frustration, a bit like the Pavlovian bell. So just make sure to look at tapping if you don't know what it is, because it really helps to remove this emotional charge. So, and explore. I was talking about self-awareness. Why are you so reactive to something that is all in all quite benign? You know, 100% probability it is a repeat of a childhood occurrence. You had to deal with that, and it's just coming back to you. Another variation I see a lot of unrequested introduction email is the power play around who is going to send the Zoom link. I'm sure some of you are laughing listening to me saying that, because that idea of who's sending the Zoom link is also sending a lot of people in turmoil. I literally have seen people, not me, of course, I'm not like that, totally spiraling down when asked to send an invitation or meeting link. Again, it is not about the video link. It is never about what is in front of you. That's what I want you to understand. It is never about what is in front of you. It is about the boundaries being crossed, or at least the perception that they are being crossed. And that is important, because it's not the same thing. And also the perception of powerlessness about it. Once you're able to see situations for what they really are, you are able to neutralize them and remove the emotional charge. So once again, you want to follow that process. In order to actually see what is going on, you need to take a step back. So when you are in fight, in flight, or freeze mode, you are just reacting. Again, you are the dog that is salivating at the sound of the bell. A very helpful tool to get out of that state, fight, flight, freeze, and create space so you can have the time to see what is going on, is microdosing mushrooms. I mentioned that 200 times. I'm going to mention again, whether they're psychedelics, whether they're not. And again, I absolutely realize that I said that many times, but most people don't give themselves this grace. They're going to try to white knuckle their way out of situation. Worse, they are leveraging prescribed drugs for years. And I think you probably read more and more articles showing how bad it is for you. But also these prescribed drugs, what they do is that they numb your reactions without obviously looking at the root causes of the problem. So what you want is actually to be more present, more in the moment, so you can understand what's going on here. You don't want to be numb. For sure, if you are numb, well, it's going to make you less reactive. You're not going to, be infuriated by, again, an intro email that's unrequested or stuff like that. But it is also dampening your joy, like it's not just dampening the bad stuff. So, and if your reason not to microdose mushrooms, psychedelic or not psychedelic, is that you don't know where to find quality products, well, visit my website. It's themicrodosediet.com. I had to think for a second here. Themicrodosediet.com, you can buy the products. It's shipped. It's very safe. It's very great products developed here in Canada, in British Columbia. So again, my point is for you to interrupt the pattern. You need to have that space, and that space is very difficult to create when we're always in this press the button, jump, press the button, jump. You need, between the press the button and jump, enough time to interrupt the pattern. Calm yourself, do some little exercise, and then instead of jumping, you're maybe not jumping as high, or at least you're calm. So that's the first situation. So the second situation, I like to call it Mrs. and Mr. Untitled. And I know the word untitled is like the word triggering. It creates a lot of excitement when uttered. Everyone has an opinion. In the speaker's mind, it relates to a specific generation, gender, social class, skin color, never theirs, of course. But I have news for you. Based on my highly non-statistically significant analysis, but highly relevant observations, untitled people belong to every age group, every social class, every gender, every race. There is no exception. So don't get stuck on that word untitled. So I had a recent encounter, just to give a bit of context of what I mean with that. And when I say recent, it's just one of my last notable encounters because I have frequent encounters with that type of people. And it was a good example, actually. So, again, someone from a loosely connected circle who I had never met in person reached out to me for a chat. I accepted, and then I kind of regretted it, to be honest, because I was like, is it one of these bait and switch that's supposed to be a conversation, and after 2 minutes you're asked to invest in a company, make an intro, or work for free? So anyway, before the call, I followed some of my own medicines, tapping, scribbling, shredding paper, anyway, to release my emotional charge, because that is very important. The last thing you want as you enter a new interaction is to come already with your emotional charge, whether defensive or offensive, because that is a recipe to make sure your fears, your doubts materialize. So you want to come as neutral as possible in the situation. So I come as neutral as possible in the situation. And to my surprise, the call was actually super pleasant, good time, whatever. I was not asked for any favor, which is always a big upside for me. And I was even asked to talk about my own project, which is also a big surprise for me. So as the conversation progressed, I offered to amplify this person's message on my socials, and I invited her as well on my podcast to talk about her new venture. So we end the call, and I gave her like tremendous insight during the call because she's starting and there are a lot of things she didn't really know. And so I agreed that I would share on LinkedIn her post that was advertising a new venture, and that I would send her dates for recording the podcast. So a couple of hours later, I had done both, and I was expecting, now I realize, dumb-wittedly, a thank you. And so that person on LinkedIn just like the post, doesn't comment, doesn't reshare, doesn't send me a thank you note, and that's that. Okay. 2 weeks later, send me a message as if we had, spoken the day before, confirming a date to record the podcast. I have to say I was a bit baffled, but was I triggered? Absolutely not. So why was I not triggered? Well, it is not my first rodeo, as I'm sure you've realized by now. And I have done the work to neutralize this type of situation. So what could have gone wrong? And what did go wrong in the past? Again, it was not the first time that someone expected my support, without even bothering to say thank you or even, oh my God, reciprocate. So I had my share of contacts, as I'm sure you do as well. And not just contacts, but what I used to call friends when I didn't know better, who used to come back from the dead when convenient for them, aka they need something from me, before ghosting me once again after I had served my purpose. Yeah, it looks like online dating, like more like what's the Tinder type of situation. Call you when I drink and then I ignore you. Well, I had a lot of that with my business contacts and my friends. And you know what? The worst part is that every time I was picking up the phone, returning the text, meeting them, obviously at a convenient time and place for them. And, listening to what I'm saying right now, you're probably thinking, is she totally dumb? No, I am not totally dumb. But once again, I was playing my usual part in the script that I had internalized years before. Work hard for attention and appreciation, and maybe if you're lucky, you will get a crumb sometime somewhere. And, by the way, actually, this tactic of unpredictability, you always act the same, but sometimes the person gives you a reward, sometimes she ignores you, sometimes she's angry, sometimes, anyway. So total unpredictability. It's called the chronic mild stress model, and it's unfortunately a very successful way to manage people because it keeps them off balance by blowing hot and cold. And it has been proven, actually, it's a real study. It has been proven that neurologically it keeps people in a state of dependency. That's a tool of choice, for narcissists and manipulator, like that, never giving you the same answer and the same behavior. So anyway, one thing I want to say as well with that is that this idea of always giving people second, third, fourth chance. This weekend, I read a quote from Maya Angelou, which was, when someone show you who they are, believe them the first time. And it really, really made me, stop for a second, because I think that was where I was always falling, is that I was like, oh, maybe I misunderstood. I was gaslighting myself, actually. Maybe I misunderstood, maybe this, maybe that. But actually, if someone is showing you something, well, take it at face value. That's what's happening. So do you see yourself in these stories about entitled people that are treating you poorly? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you don't, I would recommend for you to look again, because maybe you don't even realize that, because I don't know many people who have not been caught into that. So one thing is certain, though, we always need to be two to tango. So for someone to be disrespected again, or sorry, I should present it the other way around. For someone to be disrespectful again, so untitled, it means someone else has to open the door for that behavior to happen again. And that's what I want to say, is that I was the one opening the door constantly. So people were just like, well, she doesn't seem to care. Let's do that again. So it is very frequent, when you realize that, again, to berate yourself, and to start being very angry at yourself. But as I mentioned before, I mean, don't do that. There is no value here. You're just witnessing patterns that are, as old as you, literally. So you might be just stuck, and when I say just, it's not a just, but you might be stuck in some, old codependency dynamic. Better to be with people who don't really care about you or don't treat you poorly than to be alone. And that happens quite often. It can be, I mentioned it, the good old self-gaslighting. They don't do that on purpose. They don't do that to everyone. I shouldn't be so sensitive. I didn't understand. Da, 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 da. So whatever it is, again, take the time to explore and have compassion for yourself and for that young kid who was manipulated and coerced into accepting behaviors that were less than stellar. And on top of that, who was probably made to believe that they deserve these bad behaviors. So, and if you're wondering, oh, I manage this type of situation now, well, that's very easy. I will share it in one word: delete. Period. So the next category is Mrs. and Mr. Disrespectful. So Mrs. and Mr. Disrespectful, it's a variation on Miss and Mr. Untitled. So it can look very similar, but there is one big difference. It's the intention behind. So maybe similar behaviors, but the intention is very different. So the day I wrote that piece, it was a very interesting day. I had an example of that. So my husband and I had a call booked and prepaid at 9 a.m. with a lawyer. At 8:45 a.m., the lawyer's admin sent us an email to reschedule. I didn't see it, my husband didn't see it, and so we logged in at 9 a.m. But I don't know, like I had a bit of a lingering thought here, so I checked my email, I saw the cancellation. As I was replying to the EA, I received a message directly from the lawyer at like 9:02 telling me that she was at the emergency room with her little one. So I don't know about you, but the number of times I've been cancelled at the last minute for a little one being sick is pretty astonishing. And oddly enough, it's always right at the time we're supposed to talk. But you know what? If you are at the hospital at 8:45 a.m., it means that the kid was already sick an hour before, if not more, meaning that's when the rush schedule should have happened, not at the time of the event. I remember one of my friends, canceling on me at 5 p.m. due a terrible headache. We were supposed to meet at 5 p.m. I was already at the location. So you were what? Only realizing that you had a debilitating headache when you were already supposed to be there. I guess it was a teletransportation day. And once I had a good one as well. I had someone who actually canceled, but an hour after we were supposed to meet. Once again, it was a little one at the emergency room. And obviously, well, that means she was not on her way to meet me 2 hours before, as she should have, to be on time. And so that's a bit of a difference between being disrespectful and being entitled. And again, it's the belief behind the action. The disrespectful, that person's gonna lie through their teeth in order to get what they want or to get out of a situation they don't want to be. The untitled, on the other hand, likely won't even bother to lie. They're too self-centered to make the effort. But the same person can be both entitled and disrespectful. Yes, we have a winner. Because it really depends on the strategy of the day. Do they feel guilty enough for dropping you like a bag of shit? If the answer is yes, you will be lied to. If the answer is no, you'll just be ghosted. So the morning I wrote this piece, again, it was quite a day, and it was, when I wrote the piece, it was not even 1 p.m. I received another interesting email that was starting with, "Hi, Peggy, I sent a reply previously, but haven't heard back." So first, anyone who actually replies to an email and doesn't get an answer would not start an email with that phrase. They would expect you to have received it and actually you not to have answered. So the precision is not necessary. It is only needed if you never actually sent that email and now you want to pretend you did. And in that particular case, it was the second time, but same person has claimed to have sent me an email that I never received. At this point, I'm thinking she should really move on to carrier pigeons. That seems like a way more reliable mode of communication for her. So again, what went wrong? Nothing. Did all that crap, and I mean, it was quite a bit in just a morning, brought me over the edge with thoughts like, oh my God, people are so disrespectful. What a bunch of assholes. Da, da, da. Absolutely not. Of course, the microdosing helps, but also I can see through it now 100%. And my answer is the same as for Miss and Mr. Untitled. Delete, except for that prepaid consultation. It was rescheduled. But otherwise, delete. So if you are already boiling, listening to me, remembering some lies, last minute cancellations, false pretexts, that is fine. Boil and then process it. So next time it happens, you're not a hot mess. You'll just notice, shrug, maybe you'll smile wryly and delete. And what I really want to mention as well is that whether it's for Miss and Mr. Untitled or disrespectful, is that these people need to be cut off from your life, you know? Because as Maya Angelou said, they showed you who they were. Now, let's move on, you know? Yes, you're going to have a smaller cycle, but you're going to have more energy. And there is no point. I have people that text me, okay, let's go for coffee. You know that they will never show up. So I'm like, okay, well, let's pretend to find a date. Find a date. I don't even put it in my calendar. I can tell you that. Find a date. Okay, then they contact you. They cancel. Let's rebook. Whatever. No, I don't even bother. I don't answer. I don't answer. Why would I bother having people who are taking my time, my energy, and if they're reaching out, it's probably because they want something from me. So, just hang out with people who you respect and respect you. The rest, goodbye. So, and if you want to check out more on how to become more empowered in this type of disempowering situation, you know, again, go on my website, themicrodosediet.com, because you can access my online course, you can access my book, you can access my microdosing product. And again, like that's for you, it's not for me. Like I already know how to deal with all that stuff. So one before we move on to the next category, which is the vampire. Woohoo! I want to share some additional thoughts with you on this topic of parasites. So how you do anything is how you do everything. And that comes back to that quote of Maya Angelou. The person who's crossing boundaries will not suddenly become respectful. That's what I want you to understand. In fact, the more second, third, fourth chances you give, the more you excuse, the more you justify their behaviors in their eyes. Visibly, you don't mind being taken advantage of. You don't mind being canceled. You don't mind. So bottom line, when someone is disrespectful, it is a pattern. You are better off, as I just say, cutting off the ties as fast as you can before you get too much invested. And again, sucking your time, sucking your energy, sucking your money, sucking resources. And if you can't totally remove these people from your life because, I don't know, it's your mother, it's a relative, it's a colleague, it's a boss. Anyway, gray wall them, gray wall them. Again, low quality interactions, minimal interactions. Second point, why do we end up in these situations? Again, there is a pattern here, but there is also some societal bullshit. So we're told we need to network and that people are the keys to our success, whether it's access that new great job, that daycare, that tennis club, people are the key. And it is true somehow. But when you cultivate people solely for potential benefits or future benefits, it opened up the door for this type of behaviors. Like we're social animals. You can smell when that person in front of you is not authentic, that they have ulterior motives. We don't always want to believe our intuition, but I'm sure you know when you're being cultivated. Well, if you are cultivating people, well, these people might feel more comfortable crossing your boundaries as a payback, maybe, but just maybe because they're in position of power and they know you're gonna pretend it's fine because you think you need them. So again, I'm not saying that all the parasites in your life, some I mentioned earlier in my example, were necessarily people you were initially cultivating. Actually, very often it's the other way around. But is it helpful to take a hard look at why some people are in your life and what your own motivations are? And cultivating people also come a lot from this feeling of powerlessness. You think you need them to be able to get somewhere, to have something. So cultivating people is bad in every way of the sense, and people can smell it. The third point I want to mention, again, it's fear and powerlessness. I just said a few words on that. It's like we stay acquainted, or more than acquainted, friends, whatever, with people we don't really like and who cross our boundaries because we think we have to. As I just said, maybe we're afraid to be alone. Maybe we were afraid of repercussions, like being bad-mouthed, maybe. Maybe we were programmed as such as a kid, learn powerlessness. It's really important to dig deep to understand what is behind our motivation to stay in these patterns. Again, not to blame yourself, but really to uninstall, these faulty programs and upgrade the software. So the last section, the vampire. Woo-hoo. So the vampire really is in a category of its own. You can think of it as parasites on steroids. So it's really, I'm not lying, it's a favorite of mine. And I have to say that I have been a first-rate feed for decades. So I am particularly fond at lifting the veil on this individual. So vampires, they can look harmless, they can look fun, they can look everything in between. They don't walk around with a banner saying, I am going to suck your life force and your resources if you engage with me. Not at all. With time and experience and being burned, I learned to smell them and how to deal with them. And the trick is to cut the cord, or I should say the feeding tube, because it's literally a feeding tube, is to cut the feeding tube before it has even had the time to get installed. And of all the parasites, the vampire are the most powerful. They're tricky, they're tricksters, they want to take the best of you to fill their own bottomless void. So, what is a vampire exactly? So, it is someone who thrives on others' energy. So, I'm sure you've had experiences where you left someone or a situation feeling exhausting, literally empty, with a good twist of feeling shitty about yourself. Well, you've just encountered a vampire. Yeah. So, that might be your colleague who, under the appearance of benevolence, slowly ruins your motivation and aspirations. Can be your neighbor who traps you for 20 minutes every time they see you to talk about their foot problems. That can be the childhood friend who rants about the cost of living, their mother, their foot problems. Can be your brother who's going to sandwich a nasty remark between two innocuous comments on this food problem, for example. Can be your mother who uses you when she needs some things and forget about you the second she finds a better and easier supply. So again, the vampire takes many forms. And a vampire, I mean, dealing with a vampire is like death by 10,000 cuts. They don't want you to bleed out right away. They need you for the long run. It is a constant transfusion of your energy, your life force, your resources to them. So they keep you close, they keep you off balance, and they're like master of gaslighting. So it is very difficult, first, to recognize a vampire, second, to get rid of them. Because again, they're really like masters of deception and manipulation. And if they sense you are having doubts about their intentions, they will double down on their kindness, just enough to neutralize your suspicions. And, maybe they will even turn it into you, making you believe that you have the problems, you have trust issue, you don't really understand. Oh la la, you have really you know, bad negative mind, huh? So while your run-of-the-mill parasites will, waste your time, your energy, sometimes your money, the vampires, they want to destroy your self-confidence and suck your energy. because they want to keep you again as a permanent walking transfusion. So you cannot see clearly anymore. And anyway, you don't have physical, emotional, mental, energetic resources to live. So it's a very different, very, very different animal. The vampire really want to keep you powerless. So if he needs something, take you, throw you back. While the parasite is more opportunistic. Vampire, very strategic. That's one of the big difference. So it's the very I would say the both the biggest difference between a vampire and a parasite. First, it's the scale. The vampire is like way more damaging, but it is also the strategic aspect of a vampire. It's really calculated, not the case for a parasite. So again, as I mentioned, the goal for you is to spot the vampire as fast as you can and run in the other direction. So for that, you will have to do some exploration in your life. Who are the vampires in your life? How do they behave? Again, it's always patterns, but also educate yourself on common red flags. Because if you don't know what are the behaviors, the pattern, it's difficult for you to recognize it. And so it's very, very important for you to understand what it means for you, but also understand the general behaviors of these people. And vampires, it's what you can call a narcissist usually. That's the same. So you can read books on narcs because these are number one vampires. So again, educate yourself because if you don't know what is bad behavior, you might not always understand it, and you might have a tendency to believe gaslighting or even self-gaslight. So once you have enough understanding of what it is, you have looked at your life as well, and you're like, oh my God, I have a couple of vampires next to me, and that can be your hairdresser. I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily your mother or your spouse, like that can be people who are not that close, but close enough that they're still damaging to you. So it's going to be time for actions. And I mean, as I said, cutting off a vampire is not easy because, as I say, they want you. The life force they don't have by themselves. They need to get it somewhere, and that's gonna be you. It's you and your resources. So if on top of that, you have provided them with high quality resources, attention, encouragement, access, emotional support, maybe money, maybe, they will not want to see you live. That I want you to understand that. That's not going to work. So the additional challenge is that you probably trusted these people, and at some point you open your kimono a bit too wide, and they know stuff they shouldn't, and that opens the door for repercussions. So the best and most diplomatic way to get rid of a vampire is to become boring, greywalling, but not something that seems so obvious that you're doing that to get rid of them, that it's a strategy, like just become boring, you know? When you see them, talk about your problem, or when they try to drag you into heated gossips, emotional drama, you know, personal crisis, whatever. Talk about yourself. Talk about your own problem. Talk without revealing too much. Talk about the fact you feel so tired. Or I don't drink anymore. Like it's better for my health. Or I don't. No, I don't go out late because I have a headache. Whatever, doesn't matter. Suddenly, you become way less valuable to them. Or maybe you don't pick up the check anymore. Or maybe instead of having a full nice dinner at a fancy place, you're just going for coffee. Make yourself way less attractive, not just physically, but look at it from a perspective of these are people who want to benefit from something from you. Don't give them that, but subtly. Change things subtly. In a way, they don't realize it's for them. Maybe you can, for a few months, act like that with other people you have in common, if he knows or she knows the other people. And, so you're not drinking with everyone, you're not spending money, you're not talking about their lives, you're talking about your lives. And you'll see who stay, you'll see who won't. So that's also going to be interesting. Um, but, the challenge is that if they leave your presence feeling re-energized, they won't want to let you go. But if now they feel that when they're with you, they don't have that boost of ego, confidence, money, energy, now you're a waste of time. You're a waste of their energy. You're a waste of their time. They're going to find other people. They're going to go through their own Rolodex of people who can be taking advantage of. So it uh, it is long term. It's not a trick that is easy to implement, especially if you have long-term vampires in your life, especially if they're very close to you, and it's tough, like my mother, so she doesn't speak English, so I can totally share that, is like the worst. Like she's a terrible person. But it's difficult to avoid your mother. I did it for a couple of years, but it was not really sustainable. The best way is gray walling. If I call and when she starts going on and on with whatever in her life and I don't give her the validation she wants, and then I don't really, engage, in 5 minutes she's hanging up. So it's very, very obvious. So, and I can see that she has reallocated, she has another group of people, she lives in France. So if I don't hear about her, that I know that she has found other people, that she's when I hear about her, sometimes it's because, well, she wants to be able to say that she called her daughter this month, but it's also okay, maybe she didn't have access to them and she wants something from me. Maybe sometimes it's money, sometimes very often it's also validation, things like that. So, but the gray walling, I can tell you it works. But it took me a long, long time to master because your habits kick in. Your training kicks in. So you're so used to be propping these people up that that's what you do. So you really have, and again, I'm going back to what I was saying with microdosing, you really need to be super aware, super self-aware in order to kind of see yourself and not act that way. And you're going to act that way for a while and then you're going to be angry at yourself. Why did I do that? Well, it's like learning how to bike. At the beginning you fall. So it's really a process, but it's a process that's going to also help you regain a lot of power. And if you don't feel comfortable starting right away with your vampire, you can start with your parasites, like you can build the muscle and the stamina. But at the same time, the vampire are the most damaging. So you want to look at that. So, like it's, again, cutting them off is going to create a lot of turmoil, which for a vampire is catnip. They love turmoil, they love drama, da, da, da. And it might end up costing you a lot. So that is the most, helpful way to kind of decouple slowly, versus cutting them off, depending on who they are. If it's your freaking hairdresser, well, you know what? You just cancel your appointment and you go elsewhere. It's a bit more easy. But I'm saying that it's not easy for many people. So anyway, now you have the modus operandi, be ruthless about it. Like the vampires, that's something I want you to understand, and the parasites to some degree, they only have their own interest in mind, not yours, like, so they will want you to believe that it's not true, that, you're mistaken, da, 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 da. The reality is they could not care less about you. And it's freaking heartbreaking, I can tell you that. But the earlier you know the reality, the better it's going to be. And you can reallocate, your resources elsewhere, ideally to yourself. So, start with self-compassion because it's going to be a long roller coaster. Absolutely. So a few parting words. If you are feeling like your energy, your time, your resources are disappearing, but you have nothing to show for. You don't know. It's like, okay, oh, why am I exhausted? I'm doing nothing. Or I have nothing, really again that I can point towards. You are likely being parasitized, I guess, or vampirized. And that's something you really want to look at. Like there is a strong correlation. If you're exhausted, nothing to show for, that means you're leaking. You're leaking somewhere. So again, this guide will help you to, cut the feeding tubes and reallocate your resources to your own projects. And one last word, every time you're strengthening the muscle of don't care, delete, move on, these situations have less and less hold on you. But you have to do the work of witnessing, assessing, neutralizing them first. So wishing you a lot of luck with that. Again, you can always look at my other videos because I've talked a lot about that. My book, that's called also the microdose diet, would be helpful for you probably. But wishing you a lot of luck with that. It's not easy emotionally. It's really not easy to realize that unfortunately people you thought were your friends, your family, or just friendly contacts are actually not really interested in you maybe, and maybe more interested in your resources. And if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to write them down or reach out to me. It's always a pleasure to interact. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.